All right, I'll just start with something because you're talking about the extra time that we have when we're dedicating it to learning Torah. I was reading a book just recently of the story of the Russian Chabad refugees who escaped Russia right after the Second World War. They had an opening to get out of under the clutches of the communists, who were persecuting them really harshly. Anyhow, they ended up in a DP camp in Germany, referred to as Pucking, Germany. And they said they were there for about a year. Everybody had nothing to do because things were being provided for. And it's like they said it was just a mass yeshiva. Everybody, no matter your age, your occupation, your status, you just went to study. People just dedicated their entire day. And it was just, they said it was a tremendous, a tremendous era in their life that people always, fell back on. Instead of being the gloomy one, which it was, but they turned it into something that was just a very, very empowering year. And I think the same should be said with the opportunities that we have now. Okay, so here we are. We're starting a lesson tonight on, I'm going to bring the PowerPoint up in a minute, which means our videos will get a little bit smaller, but we'll see. The PowerPoints are going to be somewhat helpful, especially there's a nice video clip in there that we want to share with you. So this is finishing a series of discussions of lessons that we had entitled Gifts of Judaism's Gifts to the World. And we spoke about such tremendous ideas, such as the values. Every one of these values we've proven, and we've explored how the world actually was anti these ideas, how it was against the grain of common sense, of common, what people accepted as valuable. And today, we can't imagine the world without things as charity, the regard for human life, equality, a single creator, which by extension opens up the concept of looking to search for purpose in life, because there is a world that was created by a designer. What did that designer, what did that architect, what did that creator have in mind when putting us here and putting this whole thing together? We spoke about Shabbat, the concept of a time to rest. It was ridiculed. A time to sit back, and it's not doing nothing but spiritual pursuits. So these were some of the big ideas. Today we're going to take a step back. The very premise, the very concept that we are talking about a tremendous radical change from the world first accepting A as the status quo is just the reality, and Judaism breaking in a radically new idea, and that contributing to significant progress to the world is itself a very Jewish idea. Again, without going into the details, the idea that Judaism has a vision that the world is here and we're going to really make a tremendous change. We're heading somewhere. We're heading to somewhere different, and there's a way to get there. That is a radical idea in of itself. The way historians or philosophy would put it, the ancient people saw the world as being cyclical. Cyclical means what was, is, and will be. And you hear these sayings, and in a sense, some of it has truth. History repeats itself. It's just different actors. It's the same stories playing out again and again and again, and they will play out, and that we are confined to that narrative. Again, it might have a place, but Judaism doesn't subscribe that that's what all there is to life. That's all there is to history. Rather, we're going somewhere. We're going somewhere awesome, and this is where we want to take our discussion tonight. I'm going to begin with a quick reading here. You're probably done. I don't know if you have the book start. I don't know if you have the book with you, but I'll just do a reading quick. I'll do reading slowly. I meant to say I'll try to read it slowly enough so hopefully you'll pick up the idea. Thomas Cahill, author, born in 1940, writes as follows. All evidence points to there having been in the earliest religious thought a vision of the cosmos that was profoundly cyclical. We're going on a cycle. The assumption that early man made about the world were in all their essentials little different from the assumptions that later and more sophisticated societies like Greece and India would make in a more elaborate manner. What are they saying? As Henry Charles Pusch says of Greek thought in his seminal Man and Time, no event is unique. Nothing is enacted but once. Every event has been enacted, is enacted, and will be enacted perpetually. The same individuals have appeared, appear, and will appear at every turn of the circle. The Jews were the first people to break out of this cycle, the circle, to find a new way of thinking and experiencing, a new way of understanding and feeling the world. So much so that it may be said with some justice that theirs is the only new idea that human beings have ever had. The fact that we are looking for news, for real new stuff. But their worldview has become so much part of us that at this point it might as well have been written into our cells as genetic code. He's saying that the world has kind of adopted to a large degree this idea that we could create a better world. But we want to unpack this. Okay, so when you're just looking at the natural world is cycles. The natural world is cycles. The sun rises up, it goes down. The tree is born. The tree lives a certain amount of time, and then it withers, and then it dies. And everything seems to be just running on a cycle, and it's predictable. Even extraordinary events were all put in this box, that every once in a while there are extraordinary events, extraordinary natural events. And even in the landscape of humanity, it's the same human nature that's underlying and driving it all to happen. Another kind of a tyrant will emerge, and they're going to be overthrown, and then another one, and it's all just one big cycle. System. And fascinatingly, even events, this is an amazing Rashi. It always struck me in this context that now I get it. There's a Rashi, there's a commentary that, right, the classic Rashi on the Torah. He says that after Noah's flood, the next generation was known, they had a great sin. It was called the Dor HaFlaga, the generation of the Tower of Babel. They wanted to erect a huge skyscraper. What was their goal? Rashi says here, this was their goal. They said once, and every 1,600 years, the heavens can't contain all the waters, and a flood will happen. And so we're trying to build supports for the heavens. Okay, forget about the scientific research that they put into it. But the concept, when they have such an extraordinary event, they're descendants of Noah, and they're told of this tremendous flood that occurred. Instead of recognizing that there's a God that did this, and that's what brought this, no, they dismissed it as a natural phenomenon because they couldn't fathom that anything lies outside of the system. There is only a system. It's the natural system. And even when the system does something extraordinarily miraculous, you say, well, the system does this every 1,600 years. We're predicting the forecast. In 1,600 years from now, get our act together. We must build enough of these towers to support the skies. It's fascinating. The kind of reasoning, cyclical reasoning, they just could not break out of. They could not break out of to fathom that anything lies beyond what we know in our immediate vicinity. Just make sure nobody's trying to get in because they got a missed text or so. No. So Judaism says no, none of that. None of that. We're not in a system. We're not stuck in a cycle. There's a God out there. And let's talk about our vision for the world. We are going to the world is going to one day radically change how it functions. What does our vision look like? We're going to read our vision in just a moment. Yeah, I'm going to read the vision. Let's see what the vision looks like. We're going to read from Isaiah. It's our books, by the way. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. It's our books. So Isaiah tells you as follows. It shall come to pass in the end of days that they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Maimonides codifies the belief, the Jewish concept of Mashiach, of the Messianic future. He finishes his big magnum opus, his big book, his 14-volume set of the halachic codification, everything extracted from the Talmud into bite-sized code of conduct. What is Judaism? What does the Torah want from us? How should we behave? And in his final two chapters, kind of as where's all of this heading, the final two chapters in his last book is dedicated to the laws of Mashiach. What we need to know now. What we need to know now to know when the time will come. And we're going to read a little section of his final chapter. And it goes as follows. In that era, in the Messianic era, there will be neither famine nor war, neither envy nor rivalry. I think we can all appreciate this lack of famine, war. He talks about illness being eradicated. Right? I think we can appreciate that today. For there will be abundance, and back in Maimonides, and the lights will be freely available as dust. The occupation of the entire world will be solely to know God. We're going to live, from the Jewish standpoint, a world of a utopian world. What do I mean from the Jewish standpoint? Meaning not just, all right, everybody will be peaceful. Peaceful on what? And what are you doing with all that extra time? What are you doing when you don't have to spend your day? How am I going to earn a buck, and how am I going to bring home a paycheck for the family? And I don't have to worry about security, national security. You put all the whole government out of business, and we're not competing against each other. Everybody has enough. Everybody has automatically what they need. So what are you doing? We're looking for meaning. There is no meaning other than Hashem. We're all getting to know God. We're forever growing day after day in our knowledge, in our quest, and bliss. That's what it is. That's what the world is. So Judaism takes here a very, very, very radical approach for what life is, where life is headed. Life is not headed to an evolving circle that's always going to be on this little stuck on this thing in the cycle, but rather we're going somewhere fantastic. In a sense, a lot of this has been trickled down into the common thinking. The world today does adopt a lot of these big, broad, audacious goals: eradicating hunger. We see war as a bad thing, as a necessary evil. Try to avoid it. I mean, that's most nations at least subscribe to it. I don't know if they all act on it. Most nations subscribe to it. That we see, it used to be just, you're kidding me? War's not a bad thing. If you're more powerful, then you should go and expand yourself, and people will, lives will be lost and all that, just because, to assert yourself, to make a little more space for your authority and your, rulership. Today, the world has adopted this. I know we all believe very little in a lot of what the United Nations and how they go about what they're doing. But what I want to point out is, when you go there, there is a verse of Isaiah, the one that we just read, that's inscribed on the wall. So it just tells you something about the ambition and the goal of what collection of nations. That we're looking forward to this kind of utopian era. That people are like, yeah, it's within, this is doable. Now, exactly if they have the full vision of the Torah's perspective on it, it's beside the point. But what we're seeing is already a tremendous shift in people's openness to recognize that we could be going somewhere radically different than where we are now. That is Judaism's gift in Isaiah. That is Judaism's gift. Now, I want to point out Isaiah and Maimonides, their reflections and their assertion that there's going to be a future era, the Messianic era, where there is not going to be war, there's not going to be any problems. It's not because they saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, they were living in perhaps much darker times than we are today. Okay, Isaiah lived in a time where obviously any nation that wished to just wage war, just to stretch its muscle, it wasn't even frowned upon. It was totally in their right. Maimonides lived in a time where his family was persecuted. He had to pick up and relocate multiple times as the radical Muslims drove the Jewish community out of Spain. He ended up in Morocco, short stint in Israel, to Egypt. He didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but he was confident and he was absolutely positive it was coming. It didn't come from reading the news, from seeing the forecasts of the days, the predictors of the day. Hey, it looks like the market's going there, and it looks like war is going to be eradicated forever. That's on the forecast. No, it was not on the cyclical forecast. It was not a natural phenomenon, but they were positive that this is happening, and they put it in their books as simply. Isaiah is putting it as a prophecy from God. Maimonides is codifying it. Obviously, it's filled in the Talmud, scattered throughout this kind of confidence and this kind of belief, which is rooted in Judaism. I want to point out, Maimonides has the 13 principles of faith. The 13 anima means this is the 13th. It's a foundation of the Jewish faith. Okay. All right, so the first idea, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to bring up this, I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to bring up our PowerPoint here. And we'll do a quick recap here. Hi, Eileen, welcome. So, Torah, the gift.
Hi.
Hello, good. Glad you're here. Torah, the first gift we're discussing tonight, the gift of change. Ancient society was subscribed to a worldview that nature repeats itself. Time is cyclical, no permanent change. The Torah has a very different approach. God controls nature. We're not subject to nature, but we are subject to that which is way beyond nature, God. Time is linear. That's one way to put it. Another way to put it, actually, I want to just pause here for a second, because the clock, right, goes on a circle, goes on a cycle. You hit 12, you get around, you're back to 12 hours later. The calendar, in a sense, is like that too, right? You follow the circle, the seasons, and you get back to where you were. Last year we did Passover, and this year you do Passover. That's not the Jewish perspective. Star, I'm going to mention Tanya. Shout out for Tanya here as well, because I don't start studying this book. This is in the second section of Tanya, actually. But Tanya makes a very, very important and bold point about when it comes to the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is not a cycle that we're going back and we're revisiting the holidays again and again and again. Even that would be fascinating, right? You get to relive. Imagine you're like stepping in the same spot as the Exodus, and you're tapping into that energy. Tanya says, no, that doesn't do it justice. We're actually on the spiral staircase. We're on the next floor up. That would be a more accurate description. A more accurate description is we're reliving that same energy. And when you're standing on that same spot, you get that energy, except that you are on a higher place. Every year, we're on an elevated place. I know the circumstances don't always show it. Some people think we dipped this Passover, but it's not the case. Not because I see the light at the end of the tunnel, but because the Torah shows me the light at the end of the tunnel. Regardless of what I see it, and if the news anchors are telling me that or not, I know it from the Torah. That if I'm experiencing it a year later, it's an elevated year. I'm in a year above and beyond what I experienced last year. So cyclical, I'll only accept if it's a spiral staircase. So that's the idea. Time is linear. In other words, we're not going on stepping on the same spot again and again, but we're going to somewhere very different. What is the Jewish goal? Where are we heading? Mashiach. Real change is absolutely possible. and it's stipulated all over. It's scattered throughout all the books. The Talmud sees it in all of the books of the Torah as well. What is the vision? No war, famine, or envy. Pursuit of spirituality. That's where Judaism is heading. Okay. Now, fantastic. So we have great news. All right. So we have fantastic news. Our future is really bright. Question is, how do we get there? How do we get there? If we're talking about arriving at a place that's inherently out of the system of nature, despite the fact that people years ago couldn't fathom that anything lies beyond the system, everything is system and nature, but Judaism says, no, there's a messianic, there's like a miraculous future. We're out of the system. The way to get there is to introduce guidance and action that's inspired by what's beyond the system, God. If we're going to break out of the system, we're going to get there by introducing beyond the system's guidance, system from God, God's instruction. And we're going to incorporate that into our life, and that's going to help us get there to where we need to get. What is the roadmap that God gave us? But before we do that, let's talk about a very critical contribution that Judaism gave to the entire concept of morality. A lot of times people say, it is often that people say, I believe that as so-and-so or such and such activity is wrong. But if others believe otherwise, they think it's right, so be it. It's often we say that about certain things. In other words, we don't have an absolute conviction sometimes. Right? I personally think it's wrong. Well, if others believe it's right, then. But all of us also have a certain red line where we say there's certain kinds of crimes that we'll say, no. This, let's just give an example. Let's give an example. Would somebody say that, tell me if you feel that A or B is more correct? A, it is my personal opinion and belief that what Bernie Madoff did is wrong. B, what Bernie Madoff did is categorically wrong. No brainer, right? Can we get feedback here? You can unmute. I'm not sure. I don't hear it.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you.
That's a very hard one for me to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, my
Okay.
whole family was affected by it, so it's very personal.
Okay.
And I think I would have too much judgment.
Okay.
in order
Okay.
to answer the question.
Okay. All right. Let's. I think we can replace that with some other abhorrent crimes that others have committed, and we all will accept that there are times in certain crimes that we'll say, no, I'm not going to say that is my opinion that this and this crime is wrong. I'm going to say that this and this crime is categorically wrong. And the question I'm asking is, what gives us that confidence to say about a particular crime that it is wrong, categorically wrong? What gives us that confidence? And what I want to get to add is that essentially Judaism is the first. I'm going to explain my point and back up why I'm saying what I'm saying. Judaism is the first to give the world a concept of an absolute morality, which means this is objectively wrong. Not my personal opinion, not I feel that way, and you're welcome to your feelings, but this is wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everything is clear, set in stone, but the fact that I even have some things that I'm going to say this is categorically wrong, regardless of your or my opinion, is a Jewish idea, is a Jewish concept. Now,
Well, Rabbi,
yeah.
Rabbi, I would think that, since Judaism is the Torah, and since we study Torah and Torah is the word of God, then if God says it's wrong, then we can say categorically it is.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. That until the Torah came along, When I say Judaism, I don't mean to say a couple of Jews getting together over a kiddush and deciding that this is going to be how the synagogue is going to run. But I'm talking about something that absolutely is beyond me and you and your feelings and my feelings, but it's God. So when I see, so until Sinai, where God communicates the absolute moral conduct and behavior for the Jewish people, and we're going to get to it in a second, conduct for all mankind, then this radically changes the discussion of what morality is. And why is it so important? Why is it so important to talk about what's wrong with morality that's just left to our decision? The difference is huge. The difference is huge. Then the example that I gave, I think I used this in High Holidays once, is in a kosher store in Brooklyn, a non-Jewish mom is checking out, and her young son, a child, is reaching for the candy at the checkout counter. Mom, can I have this candy? And mom goes, it's not kosher. And somebody behind her in line gives her a look, says, what's up with that? You keep kosher? I mean, besides the fact it was a kosher store. She turns to her, she goes, yeah, I've seen all the other moms here do that, and it works. I've incorporated it too with my kid. She
Horrible.
No, so what's happening here is this, and you see this also in the way things work in our family, right? We have a rule that there's no candies, whatever, right? Any rule that you made, I can override. Because, if I just ask enough and the circumstances today are different and it's negotiable, we can discuss because it's your rule. But if it's coming from beyond me, it's coming from a system that's way above, that I'm beholden to, me and you are beholden to, then I can't move it. I tell my kids, this is not kosher. There's nothing we're going to do. They there's no debating there. Then they just accept it. It's a fact. Oh, there's nothing I'm going to do. It's not kosher. Now, do people fudge their behavior? Even people that subscribe to the Torah, even people that officially, are religious people. Oh, absolutely. Humans are humans. But there's an underlying motivation. If I, as a person, see morality as something so sacred, as something coming from so beyond, it's not just mankind, then I am going to work on myself. I have a much greater motivation, greater than any kind of morality that's just a joint decision by a bunch of people that made this law. Well, I know better. I know that in this circumstance, it's better for me to do this.
Harry, it says low battery, and I lost Rabbi Bensky.
I hear you. We didn't lose you. Uh-oh.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm going to put it on mute. You're back on, actually.
Yeah. I think you need to plug it in.
10%. It's okay.
Okay, so, all right. So this is where we're getting at. Before I get to in a second why Judaism is the first, but the first point I want to make is that when you have absolute morality, which means a morality coming from Hashem, it's a whole different discussion. It's a whole different motivation. There's a fire that's burning under me, that's motivating me. And I get up in the morning and I really want to be honest with myself. I have less reason to be obviously as humans, we can make everything up and make up every excuse, but there's a much better system in place of me committing to it. The 10 Commandments, before it tells me don't murder and don't steal, it starts off with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your God. Because God is the underlying principle, the underlying idea which on it morality can build itself. A true morality, which is non-negotiable, which is just, it's true because it's true and it must be adhered to. Now, I made this claim that Judaism, the Torah is the first to give us an absolute morality. The question is, well, before the Torah, aren't there other pagan systems, pagan religions, and gods, and so on? Well, they also have, I'm sure they also were beholden to some kind of code of conduct to answer to their gods, but there's something fundamentally different. If there's gods, remember, Abraham is the first to introduce God, one power, one authority to everything, all of existence. If there are gods, then even if God A with a lower G, not a capital G, even if God A says I shouldn't do it, well, I'll just subscribe to God D. God D doesn't mind if I do it, and they're warring with each other. They have different systems. So there's no absolute code of conduct. There's no absolute morality until Abraham comes around. That's Abraham's gift to mankind. Morality is real, it's absolute, and it's grounded and firmly grounded in a single God. In order to get to morality, it's critical that we have one God. It's critical that God also cares about our world, because if God didn't care, then why would God create any morals? God cares about the world, and also that God is just, because in their systems, you had gods that were not just, that were selfish, and so on. God is just, is looking for what's right. God cares about our world, and God is one. There's one authority. There's one underlying authority to everything. Thanks to Abraham, can we talk about real absolute guidance, clarity, conviction in life? That's what Torah gives us. And it's beautiful where you find these three pillars, these three foundations to what you need, what's required for morality in the story of Abraham's conversation in the Torah in Parshat Vayera, his conversation with God as God is ready to turn over city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And in it, God says, Abraham, I'm here to just notify you. Because after Abraham had his bris at the age of 99, and God says, I'm here to let you know that we're on a mission. The next stop my angels are going to do is they're going to go completely destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham says, wait, why? And God says, well, their corruption has just reached beyond the tolerance. It just can't be tolerated any further. They're just a cruel people beyond repair. And Abraham goes into this whole dialogue with God. Maybe I can find there's just a few righteous people, and in their merit, we're going to save the whole city. And in the conversation, there's a fascinating, there's these three big ideas that you can find. Three big ideas. I'm going to, you know what? Wait, let's just quickly catch up. And then I'm going to read from the story of Abraham, his conversation with God, before the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. The roadmap, how do we get out of the system? How do we get beyond the cycle? What's Judaism's roadmap? And its morality, authority that comes from the Torah, that comes from Hashem, from God. The other systems have many gods. Morality is very subjective. In Judaism, it's objective. It's not what I choose, what this God chooses, but there's always another opinion, but it's coming from Hashem. Multiple authorities and standards was the other system, pagan belief. In Judaism, there's a single authority. In the other systems, the gods themselves behaved immorally. They were just fighting for power and envy and all that stuff. And God is a just and moral God. And thirdly, the other gods are indifferent to the world. They're mostly preoccupied with establishing their status up there against the other forces that be. And God of our Torah, the God of Abraham, it cares deeply about the world. And here is the conversation of Abraham with Hashem. God said to Abraham, the outcry from Sodom, I'm reading here, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If it is, I will destroy them. I'm going to bring up the next slide, which is going to point out actually how these three pillars that are critical to give birth to real morals that are truth and unequivocal and undebatable is embedded in this story, in this story of the Torah. Okay, so first of all, God cares about the world. We just read the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great. God says, it has reached me, it has bothered me so deeply to hear what's going on the simple lack of morality that's taking place there. And I can't stand it. God cares about the world. God cares about how we behave. Abraham approached God and said to God, will you even destroy the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to do a thing such as this, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, and treat the righteous like the wicked. You see this? Far be it from you. Abraham understands and appreciates that God doesn't tolerate injustice and immorality. God, you're a moral God. You wouldn't do anything unjust. So how could you do this? That is Abraham's understanding and knowledge how God operates. God is a just and moral God. And he finishes off, will the judge of the entire earth not perform justice? He's standing embedded in his words, the judge of the entire earth. You're the only God. You're the only authority. And if you're the only authority, then of course we're all beholden to it, because there is no other authority. There is nobody else making other rules in any other part of the world that anybody can choose to subscribe to. You're the one and only, and you have subscribed to morality, and you care. And the story unfolds. And obviously, the end of the story is that God says there is nothing good in there. There was nothing good in those people. But that's not the point. The point we want to take in this is the confidence that Abraham and his descendants, and by extension, the world adopting to a large degree, that there are things that are just absolutely categorically wrong, and there are things that are categorically right. Why? Why is it not just a matter of opinion? Why can't I just, as long as nobody catches me, right? Sometimes, what's your crime? My crime is I got caught, right? Why don't I just say that I know better than the system? And there have been societies that have been pretty smart and pretty advanced in the sciences and in other disciplines of wisdom that had a messed up morality. They didn't bring God into the system. So where are we going? We started off the class. Judaism doesn't subscribe to the system that we're stuck in, this revolving thing that we're always bound to relive the same kind of catastrophes and ups and downs that we've always had to, but rather we're going somewhere to Mashiach. We're going somewhere fantastic. How do we get there? Well, we built on that. How do we get there? Well, we need to go to what's outside the system, outside beyond nature, and that's God. And if we subscribe to God's system of our conduct, of how we should behave, that's how we get to God's destination, to where we should get. If we adopt to it, we will get there. Okay? What does it look like? What is God's roadmap? So we're speaking about Torah, but there's something way, way broader than that. The Torah is God's instruction to the Jewish people. And what we're going to go to in the next section of the discussion now is what less people, even in the Jewish community, are aware of. And we're going to talk about that, why, for some reason, it is something that is not as widely known as perhaps it should be. And that is that the Torah, the God of Abraham, actually has a system, a code of behavior, a code of conduct, of mitzvahs that are directed to all of mankind, to all of humanity. And they're known as the 7 Noahide laws, Maimonides, and the big work of law, code of Maimonides, Mishneh Torah, this big book of halacha. He spells it out, obviously. Well, he's just echoing the Talmud. He just crystallizes it in his beautiful, profound way and simplistic way. And I'm going to read here. I'm going to read here a little reading from Maimonides, and it goes as follows. God commanded Adam concerning 6 matters. He forbade idolatry. And we're going to break it down. I'm going to revisit them in a second. Idolatry, blasphemy, murder, illicit sexual relations, theft. He instructed him to establish a judiciary. To Noah, God added another prohibition. consuming a limb torn from a living animal. Now, hold your thoughts for a second. We're going to see how, we're just going to break this down in a second, and we're going to see how these 7 Noahide laws, we're calling it Noahide because it is every human being alive today is a descendant of Noah. And so Noahide means basically for all mankind. That's our way, that's the rabbinic terminology for Gentiles, for all of mankind. And this general formula for moral living, we're going to break it down here, is embedded in these 7. Let's start from the first. Now, we have just come to the realization that before we're going to continue to talk about anything that we should aspire to, behave to, and things we shouldn't do because they're wrong, it must be premised, it must be rooted in a giver of law, in God. Only God has the right and has the authority and the knowledge to say that something is absolutely right or wrong. And so that's the first of the 7. Idolatry, to not subscribe to other nonsense in the Shagas, but there's Hashem, there's God. That's the underlying number 1. That's the first premise. Let's start again from the beginning. Idolatry. What's blasphemy? What's up with blasphemy? Why is that up in the big 7 here? It's important. It's important because blasphemy isn't about getting under God's thin skin. That's not what it's about. Blasphemy is a problem with me. If I don't recognize the importance of the relationship and the authority of Hashem, then I'm lacking something critical. Okay? A child should be taught that the reason why they honor their parents isn't because if not, the parents are stronger than them, or because the parents deserve it because, is my internet connection good? My computer's telling me it's not. You hear me?
You're still there. Your voice is breaking up a little bit.
All right. I'll try to not break it up. I think it was the internet that just had a weak moment. Okay, so the reason why children respect parents isn't because parents are deserve it, because they no reason other than the fact that a child, to be a healthy child and have good morals, a child must accept to respect the parents. And I've learned this, that even when calling them out for things, for inappropriate behavior toward a parent, the conversation isn't, how dare you talk to me like that? Did you just tell that to me? That's just a power struggle. A proper way to say that would be, a child does not talk to a parent like that. It's not about me. It's a problem, it's a flaw if a child doesn't have that value to talk to a parent in an appropriate, respectful manner. I'll tell them, doesn't talk to the mother like that. Child doesn't talk to the father like that. No child should talk to their parents like that. That's not about me. It's a problem. I'm concerned with you. Of course, it must be expressed in a loving way and all that. But that changes the conversation from a power struggle to just, I'm pointing out what's considered a value to us and something that I'm beholden to too. I should never talk to my parent like that. You shouldn't talk to your parent like that because it's just not appropriate. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about blasphemy. That's the understanding, the importance of blasphemy. When we take our relationship with Hashem and realize its sacredness. Number 3, illicit sexual relations. Why is it so important? Because any moral system must respect something as fundamental. The teaching and the continuity of a system must be premised on the parents having having respect for each other and not seeing a total selfish driven or a messed up system where the children are looking up at the generation above them and saying, you guys are a bunch of Rather, there needs to be the system. This is all still about creating a system where we treat the family with respect. Number 4, murder. Critical, because murder recognizes not to violate the godly image. It's critical to realizing the shared human objective in creating a better, more perfect world, a godly world. Not to violate the godly image, and don't mess with it. And we discussed it at length in the lesson that spoke about the Jewish view of the value of life, that it's not merely for the benefit of society, a mutual agreement, but it's something that is, it's seen as in awe, the value of another human life. Finally, theft and cruelty to animals. Don't abuse others and don't be sadistic. It's about respecting not only the people that are created in the God-given in God's image, but in their role that they play with the things that they have in their personal goal and mission, and how they're going to carry out to live a good life and a meaningful life. Don't be sadistic to animals, which is part of God's creation. And the judiciary system to enforce law and order, because if good people just stand by when bad things are happening, then they're an equal partner in it. Now, these 7 are also in the halachic system. They're expounded on somewhat. Theft includes things like rape. It includes kidnapping, not paying employees with an agreed upon time. The judiciary system is very broad as well. It incorporates also society looking out for the benefit of all people living in that society, including ensuring that charity is being done and things like that. These are the 6 basic principles of getting the world, humankind, to discover God's framework for moral living. Now, if you're going to say, well, you try to convince everybody in these values, we got a way to go, but that's not the Jewish view. The Jewish view, we're ready to take on big ideas. We dream. We don't say we're stuck if the world hasn't adopted. All of mankind hasn't adopted it yet. Never going to happen. That's not the Jewish way of thinking. That's a cyclical way of thinking. You're always thinking that you're stuck, and you're stuck, and you're stuck. In Judaism, we're not stuck. Now, what's our role to play? So we spoke about Mashiach. We spoke about only way you break out of a system is you follow instructions from Hashem, which is beyond the system. That's how we get there. We spoke about God. It's interesting that Judaism actually has a recorded in the Torah, a system that is a code of conduct, of morality for all human beings. Not a Jewish system. It's a code of conduct for all human beings. And don't have to be Jewish. It's just a basic human conduct that should be encouraged. Now, okay, so what are we supposed to do here? I don't think everybody read Maimonides in the world. How are we supposed to get this message over? Do we have a role to play, or will we sit on the couch and hopefully one day somebody's going to hit in a gold mine and say, hey, did you guys all see the Jews have some book, Maimonides? And he talks about, again, it's really not Maimonides, it's Talmudic. It's in other words, it's been passed down from Moses. It's Moses' system that Moses had passed down from teacher to student. This is a code of conduct for all mankind. So what's up with how's the world ever going to pick up on it? And the answer is, that's why you're here, and that's why I'm here. We are ambassadors, and our role in this is to ensure to the best of our ability that other people actually get this message. You see, it's common for people to talk about the Jewish message of the tikkun olam, the taken olam, except that when we just use tikkun olam, we're cutting and pasting, because the next words in the Siddur are letaken olam b'malchut shin dalet yud, in God's sovereignty. To fix and repair the world by being more in touch, by getting closer in touch with God, with our Creator. So if we think that the Jewish mission is merely to clean the creeks and we stop there, we have missed the point. Because, and as a matter of fact, As a matter of fact, perhaps it's even a little bit condescending that we think that we're so smart and nobody else. This is the Jewish mission. Nobody else in humanity can come up with this brilliant idea to make this world a little bit cleaner by environmentalism and all that good work. That's not uniquely Jewish. That's humanity. That's not our role. We can take part in it. That's not the sum total of the Jewish role. The Jewish role, I'm reading from Isaiah in 60, nations shall walk by your light, Israel's light, and kings by the glow of your radiance. What is our role? What is our role? I'm going to read here from Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, commentary on Exodus. Right before the giving of the Torah, God tells the Jewish people a very heartwarming statement. I'm quoting from Exodus. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests. The commentary here explains. You will be a treasure to me in the sense that you will be a kingdom of priests to guide and teach the entire human race, to call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose, which is a quote from Zephaniah, another prophet. In other words, we at Mount Sinai were tasked not merely to be insular. That's B'nai Noach. That's not Jewish to be insular. To be Jewish means to be a teacher, to be a light unto the nations, which means through me, others will learn. All of humanity will learn through me. That is a very big role to play. How do you play that role? But before we even ask how do we play the role, I'm going to stop and say 1 second. How come I don't find this major campaign that was ever launched in a shtetl? I don't see this in Jewish history really really being carried on in a major way. I mean, in times of the prophets, perhaps, yeah. Post-temple times, I definitely don't see that. Maybe in the temple, many nations would come, and there was this kind of influence that the Jewish people had on all nations. I'm talking about influence not in science and not in medicine. I'm talking about influence in spirituality. Where do we see that? Throughout the last 2,000 years. And here, we're going to open up a very, very fascinating piece of Maimonides, also in his last 2 chapters here. It's a gold mine, this ending of Maimonides' big book. And this little piece of Maimonides was actually seen as provocative in nature. And it is for that reason that almost all editions of Maimonides censored this out. And here we are. What Maimonides is going to put. He's going to make a claim, a very important lesson. Before we do that, I'm just going to quickly recap here. As Jews, humankind, we must take a personal interest in cultivating morality. That is the Jewish role. Positive. Okay, here we are. How are we doing, first of all? How are we doing so far? Is anybody? It's hard to really see everything clear. I don't even see all the cams at once. But if anybody has anything want to chime in, you're welcome to do that.
Well, did you just change the slide?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up in a second. I'm going to bring the next slide up in a second.
It didn't show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just give me a second. Okay. So before that, I'm going to read here from Maimonides. Okay. Maimonides is going to address how is it that God allows the kind of mass, the kind of tremendous power that God allowed the other the other religions, the Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam, to have at the expense of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are being persecuted right, left, and center in Maimonides' times and before and after. And here, the other nations are powerful, they're influential. Where does this come into God's plan? Maimonides is going to say, actually, as a matter of fact, the success of Christianity and Islam, Maimonides says, has actually tremendously positive news, even from a Jewish standpoint. And obviously negative news. And we're going to talk about both. First, he's going to talk about the positive news. He's taking credit for a tremendous amount of influence and the certain messages, even though they're a lot of it is lost in translation or distorted messages, but underlying messages that they've served as kind of big loudspeakers to the broader society, to mankind at large. Let me read through Maimonides here. Mishnah Torah, Laws of Kings, chapter 11, section 4, halacha 4. The designs of the Creator defy human comprehension, for his ways are not like our ways, nor are his thoughts like our thoughts. Ultimately, the events of Jesus of Nazareth and those of Muhammad the Ishmaelite, who arose after him, only serve to pave the way for the Messiah and to prepare the entire world for the time when all of humanity will serve God together. As the verse states, I will then purify the speech of all people, so that they will all call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose. How is this? By way of these religions, the world has been filled with talk of the Messiah, the Torah, and the mitzvot. As a result, awareness of these concepts has reached the furthermost islands and many spiritually insensitive nations. And these concepts have become regular topics of discussion among them. If you read Maimonides' text carefully, he points out these two big ideas that we highlighted today. A, that we're going somewhere fantastic. We're going to Mashiach, and B, how we get there is by Hashem's mitzvahs, absolute morality that's given to us by Hashem, by God. Now, Maimonides is not giving his approval on the fact that they've distorted a lot of the way the Jewish messages have come across, and that's okay. It's broken telephone, and it's a pity that today even a lot of Jews think that the Jewish concept of Mashiach or of other such ideas is the way the Christians or others that are more predominant in culture, the way they are portrayed, the way they portray it. But that's not the point, Maimonides says. Let's not lose sight of something fantastic, that this is part of God's plan. That ultimately God wanted the world to be prepared for these ideas, that there's a Mashiach coming, and there's a God that gives law. That's an underlying dayenu. If we get this, and the world, the way they have impacted billions of people is tremendous. Now, you're going to say, as we asked earlier, so why have Jews not been active in this role? Why have they been so loud and we have not been? I mean, they're proselytizing and all that. Maimonides is not asking the question, why don't we proselytize? It was not the question. But why don't we at least be the loudspeaker enough? And the answer is obviously that history never enabled it, because the Jews were not allowed to have a voice for much of history. And that's the downside of the fact that they were so powerful and we were so not unpowerful, that it was dangerous for Jews. In some places, it was dangerous for Jews to even accept a convert, because if we would be suspected that we've proselytized. To talk about spirituality out in the open, and that we have a mode of conduct that would say, well, you're trying to take over. And for Jews, it was an issue of survival. They could not do that. I'm going to read here a talk of the Rebbe, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe in 1984, it started a tremendous campaign. The Rebbe says, enough is enough. We are in a position, we have tremendous influence on our non-Jewish neighbors all around us. We work with them. We're neighbors with them. We're friendly with them, and they respect us. How is it that we are going to be so passive when we have this tremendous opportunity? And I'm going to read here from the Rebbe's talk. It is well known that Jews in previous generations were wary of any behavior that could be construed as facilitating conversion to Judaism, even when the prospective convert was the initiator, and certainly if it could be viewed as an attempt to promote conversion. This was the case even in countries where conversion to Judaism was not outlawed, because even in those countries, such behavior could have resulted in dangerous libels. In addition, there was concern that it could be used against Jews in other lands. It is self-understood that encouraging non-Jews to observe the 7 Noahide laws would also have been dangerous, because even this could have been construed as an intrusion into their faith. It is thus understood that Jews generally avoided advocating observance of the Noahide laws out of concern for their lives, and the rare occasion that something was done in this regard, it was approached with care and discretion. This is likely the reason why the subject is not discussed in Jewish legal responsa and is not mentioned in the Code of Jewish Law. Obviously, when this concern no longer applies, such as in our current climate, the obligation to promote the Noahide laws is fully applicable. Today, I'm just gonna play for you a beautiful clip of a very successful individual. His name was David Chase, and he had a very beautiful relationship with the Rebbe, and we're gonna see how the Rebbe encouraged him and was so proud of his influence of another individual, of a Gentile, to be more in touch with God. Let me just bring this up here. The positive influence of Christian Islam is Messianic awareness and mitzvah awareness. Their negative influence was persecution, and they basically made us, the Jews, scared to share our message. And here we are. Tell me if you hear it. You don't hear?
No.
No, I don't hear it.
Give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. What I'm going to do is, give me a second. Give me a second, guys. I'm going to share it again. And this time when I share it, I'm going to give the computer sound to you. All right, so it's a great clip, so I want you to hear it.
David Chase was a prominent businessman and philanthropist.
Yes?
He led numerous charitable efforts for the Chabad movement. He was appointed chairman of the board of the Rabbinical College of America in Morristown, New Jersey in 1967. In 1984, he was appointed by the Rebbe as chairman of the Machne Yisrael Development Fund.
The Rebbe had a birthday, and we all rejoiced in the fact. And I received a memo. Dear Reb Tovia David, it is not proper for a friend, ask a friend for a birthday gift. But in your case, because of the relationship we have, I would ask you to give me a birthday present, which in fact would result in you putting on tefillin and saying at the Shema Yisrael. And if you can't do any more, I'll be satisfied with that. From the day I made a commitment, I put on 1,000 tefillin, and I never failed to do it one day. And I'm really proud of it. Even today, when we are sometimes underwater and gets a little shaky, it's tough to stand up and daven it, but one way or the other way, I still do it. The Rebbe got a big kick out of it. He kind of lectured on it for a while.
Als ik ben een Jid und da ist zerrechnet, meidig Jahre wie schon im Tevi sein, ihm bin ich besser, wo der Ewigster hat ihm geschenkt mit den Chosim, zwischen sie Echet geschenkt ihm von Nutzen gesunder Eid, a Schiffel, beloschen Hamedina, a Yacht. Als wird der Mieden hat ihn gepeilt, als darf sich nicht schämen, der Miet, was Said bechaye jem. Und nicht sich nicht schämen, nicht für Iden schämen sich, nicht für nicht Iden schämen sich. Bis wann ist das umgehen, durchführen, als Bepeil. Bischassel sei Reis gefahren, Kedarke misman lisman, auf ein paar etliche Tage. Aber haben die Jemea Chefisch auf sein Jacht, Bischass vielleicht kommen, man hat viele, der gewusst hat, die viele, Schmeine Esse, viele Samide, darf er sein Ponderl Jerusalem, hat gedacht wissen, wo sie gefühlt sich Misrach. Weil sie kommen, das heißt gefunden, nach sein, die Kapajach, ich darf mir nicht wen und einzige Eize aufzufragen bei dem Kapitän, bei dem Recha Chevel von der Yacht, wo sie gefunden sich Misrach.
My sleeping quarters are below, on the lower part of the boat. His The pilot house is the upper part of the boat. In the morning when I got up, when we're on the way, I called him up. I said, by the way, Captain, what's our heading? It was the north, south, east, west, so many degrees. For 2-3 times when I asked him originally, he said to me, Mr. Chase, gave me such and such and such and such. Then one day he says, are you studying right now to be able to run? Are you trying to learn how to run a boat? You're studying navigation. I said, no. I said, the only thing, because I knew some of it, but I said, the only thing I would want to know, his name was Dick Winters. I said, Dick, what I want you to know is that I every morning pray to God before I go upstairs, before I have breakfast. And I say my Shema, I didn't go in details, but I want to face east, which is Jerusalem.
Über sie sagt als nicht gucken dich auf drüber, Sergor am Matzliach in Asoki. Und hat gedekach hat der Gerecht Achevil Bema Mishoris. Liegt ihm im Kopf zu trachten wegen dem Ebersten 3-mal am Tag, wie hat gedekach, an nicht nur zu Stammer trachten, nur stellt sich weg, macht sich mit Kolin Jono, und will mechaven sein, darf geponnen le Misrach, gedei det viele soll sein, wie viele darf sein. Über sie sagt wird getan mehr trachten wegen dem Ewigen. Also wie ich das gehört mit Klei Scheni, weiß ich nicht, was mit sein gewesen. Also machen a Prayer, aber trachten wegen dem Ewigen eine schöne Prayer. Was sie davon Reis bepeilt, das hat verbunden dem Nitiden mit der Mitzwe, wo das ist Schäle der Linie nach Vedisora, wo das ist der Linie von Sheva Mitzwe, eine von der Sheva Mitzwe in der Nähe. Und wie bald a Mitzwe hat in sich a Teve, a Mitzwe, gereres Mitzwe, ist eine sichere Sache, dass euch gehabt der Hemmscher bei dem Reich Achevil, bei dem Kapten. Wo der Fall Jomim shel Yachrize, also getrechnet Efscher Ton, a Sache, wo das nicht bezeichnet wie Jesche. Und als der Mond, dass da eine neue Reihe von dem Ebersten hat es ihm aufgehalten.
He had a wife who was one of his crew people on the boat. And we pulled into Black Island one day. He said, Mr. Chase, I wonder if you would give me permission to leave. It was a Sunday morning. To leave for an hour with my wife. If you do the davening, if you pray to God every morning, you're making me very guilty that I do not follow my faith. Please allow me to go say my prayer. I said, be my guest. I said, I'm glad that you also have a chance to pray to God and thank God. I was involved in many Jewish as well as non-Jewish causes that brought back closer the Jewish people with the non-Jewish people. And many, many times there were examples by not even trying to, when you impress something. One of the examples was when flying to Poland at the airplane, and I had a group of people who were wanting to open up an insurance company in Poland. When we were on the plane for about 3 or 4 hours coming from New York to Warsaw, daybreak started coming up and the morning started. I excused myself when we talked business, and I went over across the aisle to a seat, put a yarmulke, and took a prayer book, a siddur, and started saying my prayers. I came back to the seat, and I excused myself. They were Christians, all the 4 or 5 people that traveled with me. And I've not heard anything about the incident about 4 or 5 years later. When I get a call, I say, Mr. Chase, do you remember when we flew to Warsaw together and such day? I said, yes, of course I do. And he said to me, he said, I want you to know that you made a tremendous change in my life. I never believed in God. I never followed anything. When I saw you doing what you did, praying to God, setting aside the business, secondary, but that was more important. I changed my whole life, and I'm grateful to you. I never forget the kindness and the direction you showed me. I said, don't thank me, thank the Rebbe, because this is the way I was taught as well.
Beautiful. So back to what we're talking about. Judaism. By the way, that talk that they were showing the Rebbe's talk, it was the 11th day of Nisan, which is this coming Sunday, the Rebbe's That was the Rebbe's birthday. It was always marked with great fanfare. That's when the Rebbe started and said, I'm asking you to give me a birthday present to start putting on tefillin every day. Okay, so in any event, Mr. Chase, by the way, is a Holocaust survivor. Beautiful, it was a beautiful way how he really adopted and became an ambassador for spirituality, for meaning. The Rebbe said, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If we're in a position, it's okay for us to mingle for everything except for talking about spirituality. And the point is this: the world today, by and large, has adopted a lot of very terrific, wonderful moral values. But Jewish influence is still very relevant. In all of these areas, we have more to give. And a beautiful reading here talks about where the problem that the world probably suffers from today more than anything is where we feel that morality could be divorced from God. It's right because we accept it, society accepts that it's right. And what happens then, a beautiful way, I love this reading here. It's on page 199 if you have the book. The moral principles of Western civilization are in fact all derived from the tradition rooted in scripture and have vital meaning only in the context of that tradition. The attempt made in recent decades by secularists, thinkers, to disengage these values from their religious context in the assurance that they could live a life of their own as humanistic ethics has resulted in what one writer has called our cut flower culture. What's a cut flower? Cut flowers retain their original beauty and fragrance, but only so long as they retain the vitality that they have drawn from their now severed roots. After that is exhausted, they wither and die. So with freedom, brotherhood, justice, and personal dignity, the values that form the moral foundation of our civilization. Without the life-giving power of the faith out of which they have sprung, they possess neither meaning nor vitality. Morality ungrounded in God is indeed a house built upon sand, unable to stand up against the vagaries of impulse and the brutal pressures of power and self-interest. Very, very well articulated. The world today is beautiful. People will talk about, I hold of this value, I hold of that value. The seven Noahide laws is premised on that there's an underlying God behind it all. And every commitment to theft, to the basic stuff, to not be, to respecting even the animal life, to not be cruel. If it's rooted in God, it's going to live, and it's going to be deeper, and it's going to be truer. That's the kind of morals that God is looking for. It's coming from a real place. Now, to close up here, this is important. There are some that believe, or some historians that write very cynically, that the Jewish mission is basically done, it's accomplished. Actually, we're very grateful for the Jewish contribution to humanity, but the mission has done. The Judaism has given us terrific gifts, but has given us in past tense. The world would be able to live without the Jews into the future. In other words, even if the Jews didn't exist as a distinct people committed to the Torah, the world is fine. We already got the Jewish gift. Historians will quote the statistics which have been quoted for the last 3,000 years, that the Jews are not going to be around in 100 years or 1,000 years, which we can laugh at, because we have laughed at it for a few thousand years. But that's not the point. The point is, do we recognize, not just statistically for self-preservation, but do we recognize the critical role that we play by our commitment to the Torah, that on it hinges a tremendous amount of light that radiates to the nations. I got a call the other day from a local individual, actually it was an email, from somebody that is part of a Bible study in one of the local churches, and they wanted to know simply, do Jews still put up sukkahs? Because they've read about it in the Torah, but they've never seen a sukkah in their life. And I was proud to tell them that yes. I said, sometimes people rely on the communal one and this and that and the other. But what I found what was so important is that she needed to hear that Jews still do the sukkah, because that gives her a sense of confidence in and that this stuff is real. And probably subconsciously she knew that the relevance of her religion is born out of it's kind of a sub of Judaism, and she needed to know that Judaism is still standing. It's permanent. It's here to stay. It's eternal because it's true. And I was happy to say yes, it is. But we have a role to play. And the point is this: Pesach is here, and I'm going to close up with this little story. Before I get to the story, even I'm going to quote Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who's a tremendous Torah giant in the last generation. And he shared about a reflection. He said his opinion. He said some families were so successful in conveying Judaism to the next generation, while some families really struggled with it. And he says, I can't answer to what's happening in every family, but he says, one thing I've seen for sure, that there were some people that educated their children. This is what we do. We prepared for Pesach, but every step of the way, we were kvetching and birching under our breath. We say, oh, you have to do this. And it's so difficult to Zayin Yid, and it's so difficult to do this and to make a Seder and to be Jewish. But I got to do it. He says, you're guaranteed that that kid growing up is not going to be celebrating that Seder. It's sad because they saw parents that were terribly frightened and found it so unfulfilling. They were guilted into doing this, and that's not going to stick. The flip side of this is a beautiful story. In 1958, a Hasidic rabbi moved to Kew Garden Hills, a neighborhood, and he was a bearded Jew, totally like stuck out like a sore thumb, and in the middle of this urban Americanized community. And there was one young man who wasn't religious, didn't identify as a religious person, actually coming from a very secular background. He was very taken by this rabbi, and he got to know them. Pesach was coming, and the rabbi invited them to join his Seder on the first night of Pesach. And between the rabbi and his wife was a little baby. And in the middle of the Seder, the baby is crying, and the rabbi excused himself. He goes to another room, and he's walking back and forth, pacing back and forth, and he's rocking the baby, and he's singing a little Yiddish lullaby to the baby. The young man began to ask the rabbi, tell me about your background. And it turns out that this couple, 1958, they were married actually before the war, and they both he and her were in the concentration camps. They miraculously survived, and as a result of what the way she was treated in those camps, the doctors told her that she would not be able to bear a child. About 10 years later, they were blessed. We don't subscribe to the cyclical system. They were blessed with a child, and this was their child. And then the young man asked further. He's asking the wife, he says, "What's this Yiddish? Tell me, translate the Yiddish for me." That the father's singing to the baby, and he says, she's translating. She says he's singing, "Yes, he's good to sein a Yid. This is good to sein a Yid. How beautiful, how good it is to be Jewish." The man was taken by it, and of course, made a tremendous shift in his life. A parent who's been through hell and back appreciates that what am I giving to my child? That I'm Jewish, and it's good to be Jewish. It's good to be Jewish, and I sing it on to the next generation. That's where Judaism becomes contagious. That's where we impact our next generation. And for the context of this class, that's where we impact the people around us. When we sing who we are, when we are proud of it, and we're not stammering and stuttering and apologetic to the fact that I'm a Jew, and I do this, and I do Pesach, and I do Shabbos. It doesn't mean to come across as condescending. It means to come across as humble, but confident in who I am, in what I represent, and how I embrace my religion. That's what it means to be a light unto the nations. And how we get others to come on board, to subscribe to God's system, the God's system of our relationship with Hashem, to the morality that flourishes as a result, that's built on that kind of foundation of our relationship with Hashem, and the combined human relationship that humanity enjoys with Hashem. And then finally, in Zephaniah the prophet, we'll conclude with this verse. I will then purify the speech of all people, so that they will all call upon the name of Hashem of God and serve him with one purpose. May it be speedily in our days, even before we sit down for the Seder. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi. Hi, Laura.
So much. That was beautiful.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
This is my
Thank
first
you.
time trying this. This is
Right.
different.
a break of the news cycle.
Well, I'm looking forward to Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday's going to be great. I'm gonna share for Thursday's class. We're also going to share a great